Hello, everybody. Welcome to Writers Drinking Whiskey, your literary happy hour. I'm your two sheets to the wind host, William R. Hincy, and we got a really special episode today. I'm really excited. I'm and honored to have author James Grady on with me. James, welcome to the Whiskey Bar.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is one of the coolest things that we've got going in the literary and, entertainment cycle that comes into our home. So I want to thank you and your listeners and viewers for being here. I mean, it's an honor for me, and they're doing great by supporting you.
Right. It is. It has been a wild ride, and it's just going to keep going. So by the time people watch this behind the pool of curtains, it's going to be February 2024 with the release of your book. We're actually recording in September. So it's always fun for me because I have all of this fun, but then I have to wait like 5 months. Like I can't. Now I can share it. So I'm really, really stoked to have you here and excited to share with everyone. When the time comes. So let me give you a fairly brief introduction because you have too much credits for us to possibly cover, and everyone can Google search and find all of them. But between your long, noteworthy writing career here, which I think is really exemplified when you have a wiki page, that's when you know you've made it. And you have a wiki page.
Unfortunately, my wiki page is riddled with errors, and I've been trying to fix it. So, Yes, I have one. It's pretty close to accurate, but I'll get it there. By February, I hope to get it there.
Very good. So we have probably you wrote 6 Days of the Condor, which famously was adapted into the movie It's 3 Days of the Condor, which we happened to watch last night when my wife and family heard you were coming on. They're like, what? There's a movie? Oh, let's watch it. So we were watching it last night, which is always fun watching movies from like the 70s with a 12-year-old, because inevitably they go, it's so slow to start. And my son, though, ends up loving them. And I'm like, see, it doesn't always have to be like action upon action upon action. Like, you can build a little. And he was like, oh, yeah, I really liked that. So you have, the 6 Days of the Condor. Written lots of, it's like a lot of spy espionage procedurals things. I think some of the notable ones, there was Mad Dog's Last Days of the Condor. I think, was that the last of the Condor series?
It was the last full novel of the Condor series. I did a benefit for a bookshop in New York called the Mysterious Bookshop, and they had Michael Conley and I think Megan Abbott and me and other authors write a profile of their famous character. Well, you can't tell me to write 4,000 words and so I turned in a novella of some significance called Condor, and that's available mostly through the Mysterious Bookshop in New York because it's a fundraiser for them. Although I think there's a Kindle available on Amazon.
Sure, that's really neat. That's fun. I'll have to check that one out. And I'll put a link. We'll get it after the show, but I'll put a link to the Mysterious Bookshop and things. Anything we talk about, I try to gather everything and leave it on the show notes on YouTube. Or if it goes too long, you find them all on my website because I don't have character restrictions there. And then the last, and I did notice you had the book Steel Town, which I don't think is about Pittsburgh, but should be about the Steelers.
It was about Youngstown. And the funny thing about that book was I lost the battle with the publishers for a long reason. I wanted to call it Steel Town, Stealtown, because that's a much, more exciting title. And it was really what Youngstown was like just before I wrote that essentially homage to Dashiell Hammett's Red Harvest. It is, so I love the book, but it was one of those, all the authors you're going to talk to on this show can fill up their time with publishing horror stories, and the title of this one was so we'll just move on from that.
Sure. I have my own, so I feel you. And so that was the books, and then your latest book, which we'll discuss a bunch today, is The Smoke in Our Eyes, which will be coming out concurrent about with this, maybe same day, maybe right around there, one way or the other. And then that's been described. I have to include some of these because you had some really brilliant blurbs, and I want to like give you full honor with these. So you've been described as Bob Dylan and George Orwell, which is two people you don't hear often together, but would probably make a really fun dinner party.
Oh, I almost felt I should quit after the Washington Post described me as that. How much better is it going to get? You know.
Exactly. And then you were, and then the book itself, I think, was described as compared to Kill a Mockingbird. And the basic, and feel free to jump in. I think the basic, if you were to try to put it into a sentence, it's kind of the coming of age story of the protagonist Lucas and the country post World War II.
Right. Exactly. In 1959, the year the music didn't die, but the first year of our first credible scientific warning about global warming and the climate crisis. Just
oh wow,
1959. We have started thinking about it.
Right, and at least it's 2023, 24 when this airs, and we're still thinking about it.
Yeah, let's maybe we could start doing something more about it.
You gotta really think about these things before you can act.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, favorite. Bill, I forgot.
Yeah. My favorite California story is they were talking about putting a water desalination plant in Huntington Beach, and they said, "Oh, committee votes to reject it," and that was like the headline. And I'm like, "Oh, I wonder why?" Because we're California, we're always like in drought and wanting for water. And you can read at it. Yeah, the committee decided that they didn't properly take into account sea level rise and some other thing. And then I read on, and it's actually been, the proposal started 30 years prior, and it hadn't gotten to the committee. And this committee doesn't approve or not. It just makes a recommendation. So it took 30 years to get to the recommendation, which is the rejection. And then, I don't know where, I maybe another 30 years until it can be approved or declined. So
when your son takes over this broadcast, he'll be able to tell that story too,
That's funny. That's a line in one of my books is why have kids if, otherwise just to leave your problems to, right? Like you have them so you can just leave them your problems. Man,
I hadn't thought of it that way. I'll call my children as soon as we're done.
Yeah, exactly. And then the non-writing stuff, which I was excited to talk about today too, is you were an investigative journalist, is muckraker, which is maybe the best English word. Is that the good term?
The term muckraker. That's one of that makes me feel so proud when I realize I got to be a muckraker, and to some degree, that attitude I work into my fiction. I always try to reveal things for the readers that they may not otherwise hear or learn about.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I saw that. I love that word too. It's just such a fabulous word to say and read. And then you were a staff aide for the Montana Constitutional Convention.
Yep, that was astonishing. First job out of college. It's nice.
Really?
And the reason I got the job, I knew nothing about the law, and I college degree, but yada yada. I was really the most unqualified person to work there, except they discovered they needed someone who could write fast.
Right.
And here I was. So I then got to help really a wonderful exercise in democracy that created a document that is helping shape the lives not just of Montanans, but really the nation now. I mean, there was that great lawsuit with teenagers who are using the Montana State Constitution provision about a clean, safe, and healthy environment to force government to pay attention to things like global warming.
Right. That is awesome. Yeah, and we're gonna talk about that a ton because once I saw that, I was like, oh man, I hope he's cool to talk about that because that sounds so exciting.
In fact, it's like to be trying to get me off, or go back to talking about your novel, Jim. No, let's,
We're here. But first we need to attend to matters of church and state. So what are we drinking?
What we are drinking, I'm gonna hold it up.
Yeah.
This is a bottle of Glenfiddich single malt Scotch. And I was not a Scotch drinker until 1 year, about 12 years ago, when my daughter, who's a pretty well-known Academy Award nominated filmmaker, documentary maker, was in Europe and stuck in the Glasgow airport and decided to get a gift for me. And she just grabbed a bottle of Glenfiddich Scotch, came home, gave it to me. When your daughter gives you a gift, you learn to love it. And I have ever since then, when it's time to drink whiskey, it's Glenfiddich for me. And I just I'm gonna hold up the proof, and I'm gonna toast all of your viewers and you, and thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And I am going to also a gift bottle here. We have an also Scotch. So I got a bottle of a Johnny Walker Blue Label, and it's funny because my wife, when we were before we got married, we wanted to bring our families together because they didn't really know each other. And my wife's Chinese, I'm Irish, Italian, and whatever other muddy things that are in there.
Right.
And so we wanted to bring the family together, get a chance to meet in there. And she had her cousin Ty, got me this bottle, and he always described himself as the real cousin. I think he regrets it now because I've never forgot it. We're like 14 years later, and I'm like, oh, real cousin Ty. And he's like, yeah, it's fine. But he got me this, and my deal is anytime someone gifts me a bottle, I either wait to drink it with them, but I will not open it at minimum unless I'm drinking it with someone. So it has to be a special occasion. And so I'm going to try to save you some Ty for next time you're here, but I'm gonna cork this today, and I don't know what I do with my cup. Oh, there it is. And take a drink of that. So we will both be sipping on some Scotch here. Oops.
Fine Scotch at that.
It is. And so cheers to see if there it is on the screen. Cheers to you. And the rule for people watching, in case they've forgotten, is when we drink or you see us drink on camera, you should be drinking. So that's your cue.
We're all one.
Exactly. I want to eventually do this show in some bars and things and have everyone there and get to meet with people in person.
That would be great. That would be, there's this wonderful program called Noir at the Bar. And this would be a wonderful kind of parallel
sure
for people literally all over the world now. They could be doing this.
Yeah. That's what I thought that'd be fun. So we'll see. We'll cross our fingers. Hopefully by the time this airs, I have big news and we're doing some. And are you in Montana, or do I just think that because I was reading the book?
I'm in our Silver Spring, Maryland home, which is just literally 17 blocks from the DC line inside the Beltway.
Oh, okay.
And I moved there to work for, again, part of my luck. I got to work for a United States Senator from Montana named Lee Metcalf on a fellowship. And then I got Jack Anderson. I woke up suddenly and realized I've been living in Washington now since 1973, or December 73. And I miss Montana. It's in my, and I'm going to pronounce it the way we pronounce it there. It's in my roots. And it, in a way, I think, however, me staying out of Montana, except I would go back every year, but not living there, let me see it in a way more honestly and deeply and emotionally than I would be if I'd have, stayed there and raised my family there. This way, it's like going home every time I type a word.
Sure. I believe it. I think I can sympathize with that because it's funny. I was born in Morgantown, West Virginia, And on this show, I've mispronounced that multiple times and had to correct it on the screen because I'll call it Morganstown, not Morgantown.
Yeah.
And this past summer, we were going out to visit my family. All my family's like Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia. And we moved. I was a military brat. My dad was in the Air Force, so we ended up in Omaha, Nebraska. And I think Duffet Air Force Base is the Air Force Base right there. And then in California, and then he was in aerospace. So we've been out here, and most of my memories are California. But I was born in Morgantown, but I always told people I'd never been. It seems like paradoxical, but I had no memories. Like I just was a baby, was there, and was shuffled out. And so,
wow.
Yeah, so this year I was like, oh, when we went back to visit family, I'm like, I want to go do a Morgantown day. Like I hear it's beautiful. Like there's the Cheat Lake right there. I hear it's beautiful. I'm like, I want to go see it and just kind of be there, And so I finally was in the place of my birth 45 years later. It's right around my birthday too, in fact, 45 years later. And it is beautiful. It's a beautiful little college city, and the Cheat Lake is gorgeous. But so it was really fun, but it's like it's supposed to be. It's
go ahead.
Huh?
You have to write a novel called Coming Home.
Right.
And about you going back to Morgantown.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I will stop giving career advice to.
I'm pleased. I need it. I'm clearly just drinking here all the time. I need a little bit of writing mentorship would help. But yeah, no, it was very funny just thinking of it that way. But it did always, every time I go back, there's that you feel something that you're there. And I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just the knowing, or maybe something's kind of imprinted on you. But going back as an adult, I was able to see it much differently than when I talked to my older brother who lived out there for a long time. My other family, I have a very different view of it.
Right.
And I think sometimes as a writer, that distance, I forget the writer, there's the old saying of like in tranquility or something, like recollection and tranquility or something or other, which I don't think is always necessary. But I think sometimes that being removed from the relationship, from the place, it gives you a little better perspective and ability to write about it in a wholesome, complete way.
I agree.
So right out of college, you went into the, Montana, drafting the Constitution. Right. Maybe you could tell us just the maybe summary bullet points version of kind of your writing journey, like where that took you to becoming the writer you are today.
It's funny. I realized when I was about 10 years old that all I wanted to do was write fiction. And by the time I was about 14, I realized that's about all I was really good at anyway. And I actually was one of those, and I'm sure there's somebody in our audience today. I wrote my senior class play.
Very cool.
I went to the University of Montana, and this is how naive I was. I got a work study fellowship internship for the School of Journalism. Based on, I'd also been writing for the high school newspaper. I kept waiting in my first journalism class for them to start talking about novels and short stories and poetry and fiction. And then I heard someone make a disparaging comment. Well, at least we're not over in the English department where they're just only talking about. And I realized I had no idea of the academic universe and how it handled writing. But they kept giving me these little tiny, $100 grant or award in the School of Journalism. And I couldn't pass that up. I would study in the creative writing department. I had the poet Richard Hugo was my main professor there. I would study in the journalism department, and then I would study in the political philosophy department. So I had this strange triumph or triumvirate of, I wish it was a triumph, so that it then enabled me when I'm graduating, but I know what am I going? Oh, the Constitution wants me to help. Sure, I'll help. I did that. I knew that just wanted to quit and be a fiction author. But we'd been poor for 6 months in my family, and there is no romance to being a poor, starving writer. And one of my cousins was having a baby without a partner, so I stayed in the state capitol. I took first a road crew job, which I'd always been doing, and then a job with the state bureaucracy. Until the baby was born, I'd saved all this money. I'd used the IBM Selectric typewriter at my office in the night to type 6 days of the Condor, so I could get it, in finals.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I went to the library. I found about 20 publishing houses were publishing things like 6 Days of the Condor. I went to a book I think it was called Writer's Market, in which I found 6 of them accepted unsolicited manuscripts. Right. I wrote one of the most truthful but really strained letter of pitch letter about who I was, and I sent it off to the first publisher. It came back to me rejected. And just as I was moving to Missoula, Montana, where the university had been, I sent it off to the second publisher. And I am living in Missoula in a shack is kind of a kind word for it. But when I got the call, I was stunned. The W.W. Norton said, we like your book, 6 Days of the Condor. We're going to buy it for, wait for it, $1,000. And we think it could be a movie. And I got over the excitement, and I'm going, oh, don't tell this guy. This a guy from nowhere having his first book become a movie. That's such a cliche, unbelievable story. And 2 weeks later, I'm using gray duct tape to create a shower in my bathroom, and I get a phone call, and they said, we sold your book to the movies, and your share is like, I can say it now, $81,000, which was 7 years of my dad's income.
Sure.
And I'm listening there, and evidently I was on speakerphone with everybody in Norton, and I just going, yeah, okay. And they said, well, are you all right? And I said, I haven't heard anything since you said 81,000. I got to go back to fixing that shower. So that launched me. And a week later, I got the fellowship to go work on the senator from Montana staff during the year of Watergate. I mean, I kept going, wow, this adulthood thing is working out pretty well.
Hey, this is pretty easy. Why did my parents make it look so hard?
Yeah, and then one of my friends who I'd gone to college with was working at Jack Anderson's. 2 days after the fellowship, I'm wondering what ended in the Senate. I'm wondering, what the hell am I going to do? I mean, I got this money. But should I move to San Francisco or Los Angeles or back to Montana? New York has got too many tall skyscrapers. And the phone rings again. And Jack Clordy, who went on to run Nightline for NBC, said, Jim, I'm working at Jack Anderson's, and I have all the other reporters are out of town covering stories, and none of my interns know what to do after they answer the phone and say hello. Could you come in and just help for 3 months? And maybe, I went in to help for 3 months, stayed 4 years, went on staff, and became a muckraker. And to my luck, to my great luck, I will drink.
Yeah, cheers to that.
After that, it was just, following the inspiration wherever it took me, which was wonderful. I may be the luckiest person you ever have on your show. I just feel like, I must have done something really nice in a past life, because I got a great wife, I got great kids, I got a great career, and I get to come on your show. So what more could What more?
This is probably the pinnacle, after all you described.
Yeah. Let's. I'll drink to that and make no comment other than
all right.
I hope like you have to have me back.
That was funny. That's funny. I think we were at Disneyland, actually. My granddaughter turned 2. So we went to Disneyland. This was, I think, about 2 weeks ago. And I was going, so my dad has colon cancer. He's doing very well, but because he has colon cancer, I needed to start my colonoscopies early. In fact, the doctor, 45 is the earliest you're supposed to. My doctor, though, was like, you should have been here at 40. He's like, but you'll be okay. But we have to do this. And so we're going to go do, I think I had my colonoscopy on Monday. So it's like Saturday, we're there. Friday, I have the gout. So I have a gout attack. And so I'm limping around. Then we're at Disney, all this pain. And I'm walking with my son and my wife. And they're giving me a hard time. We're like, oh, why is everything so painful for you? Like, you're always like, somehow you're in pain. You're so unlucky. I'm like, look, I have a great wife. My son's my best friend. Like, life's good, but the Lord doesn't give with both hands. So constant inconvenience, constant like pains and things. But I'm healthy and everything. You have a great family, but there's always something that's making me limp around metaphorically or physically. So awesome. So maybe we can get into the investigative journalism piece, because that was really fun. So I was wondering, generally, was there ever any cases that you worked on that, because you read or watch Condor, and there's not that was journalism, but you see the intrigue and all of this. Was there ever any cases you had worked on that you felt like physically in danger, anything like that?
There were a few times. Well, I augmented I didn't understand how any other reporter wasn't doing this. I went on probably 3 weeks of police ride-alongs with the uniform squad. And then I went with what was called then the prostitution and perversion squad for 3 weeks of nights, in which I saw human slavery. That's the only way to describe the way prostitution, I think, still works in this country. And then I went with the murder squad, the homicide squad. And I got to tell you, there were times in those instances where it's they're shooting at us, but there were times, you're going to a public space to meet a essentially organized crime source, and he says, well, let's walk to the car. And what is your call?
Right.
And so there were times like that I felt endangered. I once sat across the table from one of the largest cocaine importers in the West Coast, who ironically was an adjunct to the Raymond Patriarch crime family in Boston. Pay Me Raymond is what they call him. And I'm talking to this guy. He's got a bodyguard behind him, but that's not what I'm really worried about. There's 2 more standing behind me. And he says, you know why we talk to you? And I, full of like righteous, certainty said, well, I say, well, because the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment and various laws protect me from being able to be, I can't be forced to a grand jury. And he said, we don't give a shit about any of that.
Right.
Sitting there. And he said, we talk to you because we know you know what we know, and what happens? And I said, yeah. And I just had to just stare him down and know that I let him know I wasn't going to fold, and that I was going to, as we said in those days, I was going to hold my mud.
Right.
You know, it was so that was a when I got free of that situation, I just kind of I think I went and had a scotch somewhere. I still think I need one.
Right. Maybe it was Glenfiddich back then. He didn't even realize it when your daughter got it for you. Like,
no,
I think life.
I think back then it was 7 and 7 or bourbon of some kind, you know. But yeah, if you're doing your job right as a reporter, you almost always at some point come into some risk, and it especially nowadays where more Americans tend to hate journalists than they ever did before. It's an astonishing development, and I'm sorry for that development. I'm so grateful for the huge number of still working, still great journalists we have out there. You know, it's like if they get it 90% right, that's still better than not taking whatever is shoved down our throats by the big money.
Right. Yeah. Amen to that. Were there ever any cases that, where you learned things and that learning of it just, like affected you, like still haunts you to this day? I'm thinking like, particularly like, right. Like you're a kid and you learn, oh, the mob really murders people. Right. And then that kind of affects you. Was there ever any cases like that for you as an adult where like you learn something and still now it haunts you?
Yeah. And, cases where I knew that the stories, I knew that the prostitutes were they were enslaved by bad guys. I mean, cases where I would learn about organized crime used to take industrial waste, fill tanker trucks, and drive down the New Jersey Parkway, letting the polluted liquids spill out onto the superhighways. And all those people, from New Jersey and in Pennsylvania, they were getting polluted on, and they didn't even know. You learn about. There were eye openers all the time, just all the time. And some of them would be comic, some of them would just haunt you, just really haunt you, and still do. There's a corner in Washington, D.C. where I watched a young girl from West Virginia out on her first night being a prostitute, and the cops we couldn't get her to escape. And I drove back after I got off shift. I drove past the corner, and her nickname was Sunshine. And I saw her standing on the corner. The look on her face, I knew she'd, as they called it back then, broken luck, and had now turned her first prostitution trick, and part of her died, and I watched that death unfolding in front of me, and that corner haunts me to this day. And now it's a hip corner. I mean, it's like
it's gentrified now.
Yeah, it's very gentrified, but it's like I can't go past there without thinking about Sunshine.
Sure. Yeah, I can believe that. And this would have been what, mid 70s, early 80s?
This was later. This was early 80s, early 80s, just before gentrification really hit. It was, that kind of thing is out there today, and I hope our viewers just take a little more open-eyed look at the street they drive down on the way to having a great dinner with some friends, which I hope they're going to do.
Sure.
Keep their eyes open for this strange and sometimes terrible, but often just wonderful world we live in.
Right. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, because it is. If you lose sight of the good parts, you just feel defeated, and you're never going to do anything that helps anyone, or you're never going to help sunshine, right? You're never going to do anything if you feel so defeated by it. But if you remember, there's still good things, and it's okay for you to go have that nice steak dinner, or to go buy that $12 coffee, whatever we're charging for coffee nowadays. But that there's also these other things going on, and be aware and try to, do what we can to try to help it. Because I don't even know, like, sex trafficking as a common term seems relatively new, right? I mean, the last 10-ish years, I kind of remember then start talking about that. In fact, we were visiting some friends in Tucson, Arizona, and my wife had gone to the bathroom. It's fairly close for anyone who doesn't know the geography. It's 40 minutes from the border with Mexico. And my wife went to use the bathroom at the airport. And she's like, oh, when you go in, the stall closes in the women's restroom, and there's a number you can call for help for sex trafficking. It's like, do you need help? And you can dial that number. It gives you a number. And I think there was a couple other things you can do where they'll try to help you. But it's such a problem now that, like, the airports, and it's horrible. I can imagine. I think we don't want to acknowledge it, but it's maybe the most obscene thing of our times.
Yeah, we have a lot of problems and horrors and terrors in this world, but it's one of the things that we do to fight them is what you did in the grocery store. You smiled to a stranger. That simple act, that recognition of another human being, that kind of thing ripples out, just as the same way evil ripples out. So, I'm proud of you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is those small things, those small acts. I don't even know that that's a kindness, right? To me, that's just what you do.
But... Exactly. Now it's a kindness. It used to be the way of life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was one of the things that fascinated me about going back and writing about the way things used to be in America's coming of age. We went from being a culture, I mean, in growing up in small town Montana, you knew that you had to always help a stranger, because when the blizzard hit, it might be your turn to get help from a stranger. So, there was, we were, the right to swing our fist ended when we reached the jaw of that other person. And that was how we lived and built this country from really, before World War II, we were not that important.
Right.
And after World War II, as the first nuclear superpower, we became more important. And it is now vital for us to go back and talk about the American dream, and talk about what does it mean today, and what can we do to make things better for our kids and grandkids tomorrow. And one way is just to realize how we got here.
Mm-hmm.
You Ziggy Marley. You don't know your past, you won't know your future.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. And I think that's a common mistake we make nowadays. I think, especially with social media and things, it's that you get a lot of people, I'm a 12-year-old, I'm connected with a lot of 12-year-olds, and we make this little echo chamber, but it's like, you don't know what preceded this. Like, my favorite thing is I joke with my wife about it, because she had gone to Starbucks and got her $12 coffee, right? I bag on it. I go get $12 coffees all the time, because what else do you do nowadays,
Right.
Next time you overpay for coffee. And my son likes the cake pops, and they put that next to like a warm sandwich. And she's like, oh, I wouldn't put these right next to each other in the bag. She's telling the clerk there, she's like, oh, I wouldn't put it. My wife's the sweetest person, right? I just wouldn't put them next to each other because it's going to melt the cake pops. So, maybe next time, just, if in the future, just don't put them next to each other. And she's like, oh, the girl just saying, look, nodded at her. I'm like, yeah, she was thinking, okay, boomer, right? Because that's like the phrase now, right? Like, okay, boomer. But it's like, it wasn't like some generation all got together and decided all of these fates. These were countless decisions by countless people of countless different generations, all of this unfolding and not always knowing what those decisions mean. But you have to start unfolding that back to kind of understand why those decisions were made, because you're just doomed to repeat it, right? It's that whole you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. It's very true. It's like, you don't know why they did that. Well, yeah, you just do the other thing. Maybe that other thing has been tried before and it didn't work. Maybe it's going to be a disaster. Maybe there's a reason we did this in the first place and it made good sense. We had glass bottles. We refilled those glass bottles. It was awesome. Everything tasted better. We decided plastic bottles were so awesome. And now we're like, it's polluting the world. You have to have 86 trash cans to throw your recyclables away. And it was like, we used to just reuse things. That's better than recycling, right? Like, let's reuse. But I was wondering, so what makes a good muckraker? And you might have, I think you touched on this before too, but I'm wondering also, how does that translate to your writing?
Well, the difference between a muckraker, an investigative journalist, and a regular journalist is a great journalist looks out and sees the forest and writes about that. A muckraker looks out, sees the trees, and writes about that. And it's an attitude of wanting to understand on a deeper level, wanting to go beyond, the plant closed today. Well, why did the plant close? And what was that fire in the Cuyahoga again? It just there's just there's a different attitude when you walk into a room with other journalists, and like there's a let's say we're all going to a very important political after party on the Senate side, and the muckraker is not looking to be seen. He's looking to be invisible, and he's looking to see who's doing nods that they don't want noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just part of it, and it's like a good muckraker. Like Cy Hirsch would spend a year tracking down a story until he finally found, a midshipman who, he was the guy who delivered the atom bomb accidentally to the White House. It just, so I don't know. I see it dying down as a profession. I see so many journalists now looking at their screens and Googling to come up with their stories. Well, if it's already on Google, it's not news anymore. I mean, you can build a story out of several postings, and it's a kind of a news story. I once was trying to teach a new muckraker for Politics Daily, AOL's brief foray into journalism that got Huffington Post crunched it, and he kept. At one point, I took his laptop and I closed it on his hand, and I said, "Watch this." And I walked up, and instead of checking why the Corps of Engineers, a notoriously boring group of Army officers, were on Capitol Hill, I just went up and said, "Colonel, what's going on with the Corps? Why are you today?" And it just shocked this millennial generation, or he might even been younger, guy that you could just do that. You could talk to people. So I don't know. I think we'll always have muckrakers, and in fiction, wow. I mean, you have guys like John Dos Passos, John Steinbeck. There were, Grapes of Wrath was essentially a amazing piece of muckraking, and there were a lot of them. It just there were guys like Lincoln Steffens who wrote fiction, and I don't know if you know this, but Marilyn Monroe was forbidden by the studios to read the biography of Lincoln Steffens in public. I mean, she helped found SANE and was far more than what she's remembered as. But journalists, I don't know, writers of good fiction, whether they're Elmer Leonard or John Steinbeck or Megan Abbott, or thousands more will keep rolling off my tongue and
sure,
jumble up, and I won't be remembered. But there are a lot of really good fiction. Just twists reality in a truthful way and lets the reader see something. Doesn't tell him what he's going to see, but lets him see it. Good fiction shows rather than telling.
Sure.
Yeah,
that's a beautiful way to put it, because I think that saying for writers gets misconstrued a lot. Like, show, don't tell. And they think that means you can never just have some narration to help describe something.
Oh, no.
But I think the way you put it is the exact meaning of that. Just show. You don't have to tell them what it means all the time.
Yeah.
Show them what it means.
Yeah.
And that'll mean something far more.
You can do that in any prose style. I mean, you could do it in any first, second, third person. You can do it in, like a memoir style. You can do it from the omniscient narrator. It's a couple of authors who I was so. I am such a groupie for authors. It's almost embarrassing, but both Elmore Leonard and Harlan Ellison, two of our I'd call them rebel authors, who made a huge mark on American literature, would argue with me because I would use a verb other than said. And you guys are my friends and I studied you, but can I just say moaned every time? No, I don't know quite how I got on those stories, but those fiction is a way into the world beyond what you're getting fed by the news or by your loud, noisy neighbor or your social media or whoever. It's just, and it's fiction also comes out in music. I mean, I think the great American author of my generation, the boomers, is Bruce Springsteen. I think the guy has created a work of a body of fiction that is often muckraking. Atlantic City. I mean, my God, it just it tells you so much about what's going on in life, and we're fortunate still, so that a lot of our good fiction, can come at us fairly freely. I mean, I remember growing up turning on the radio when you get in the car, and you never knew. You didn't pick it. You didn't Spotify getting told what you were going to be told. It chose you for the story it wanted you to hear then. I love that, and I think that's one thing we're in danger of losing, and I hope that's one thing that comes back. That's why I still write fiction and love it. And I'm going to drink. I'm going to have a drink now. So everyone raise their glass.
Glass. No, and I think I noticed this, that I had never really spent much time on YouTube, but I started going on a little bit when I was first conceived of this show, because the show's on YouTube. So I just wanted to get a sense for what other people were doing. And at first it was kind of fun. I discovered a lot of things I would have never discovered before, right? There's so much like history things. And like in 20 minutes, it'll explain the battle of this or that, right? And it's cool. I'm like, oh, I never really got a in-depth breakdown of this medieval battle and kind of interesting, and all kinds of other things, right? But then the algorithm kicked in. And so now when I go on, it's just, and it's, clearly a Steeler fan, like it'll be like a Steeler thing, a Laker thing, maybe a historical thing, some other random, and I'm like, but it's nothing new. This is boring. I like to like feed me other stuff because I don't know that I like it, but I may end up loving that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. You go on and you pick the song and you keep doing that. But the radio was cool because you would hear something you wouldn't have heard otherwise and go, oh, I kind of like that. That was awesome. Who was that? I want to listen to more.
Yeah, and you missed the DJ telling you who it was. So for days you would drive around listening.
Right.
And
then you have to get the tapes and try to record it if you did want to listen to it on your own. So the simple joys these kids are missing. So that's awesome. We should probably, just for the sake of time, because I could ask you about muckraking till the cows come home, as I don't know that anyone says anymore, but I'm going to try to bring back just on this show. Maybe we can move on to the Montana Constitutional Convention. And so one of the things I had it made me think of it was reading The Smoke in Our Eyes. Was there's a passage where Lucas is questioning how the shape the day took. And I think it was like, oh, Tuesday is supposed to be this way, Wednesday. And I kind of forget now which day it was precisely. But at the end, I think it's when Grandma ends up going to the nursery home, if I'm remembering it right. And he's like, this day, the shape of this day took, completely different. And I think about, and I don't talk a lot of politics on this show just because there's probably too many places that talk politics all the time. And I think
agree.
It gets kind of drab and boring. But what interests me is the shape of government. And I don't know that we talk about it enough. So I just wonder, in the process of drafting that new, I forget when I read about it. I didn't do a lot of muckraking research, but I kind of brushed through. But did the shape of the final constitution, did it morph over time? Was it like you expected from the beginning? Like, how did that play out?
It played out even better than I think the delegates and the small staff thought it would be. I mean, we were able, and it was written by everyone from far right Republicans to you wouldn't want to call them communists, but they were far left, Democrats, without party labels. Nobody was elected with a party label. And they created a shape of government designed to think of the people first. And that not just the institutions, not, well, we have to have three branches. And no. What's going to work for the people? And that was a victory that I think surprised almost everybody. Sure. And to this day, that shape is helping the lives of ordinary Montanans and serving as an example to people in every other state. That's working on what are we going to do with our government?
Right. Yeah. I think about that a lot. I've as my dad is really into like the Fox News, right? And so he'll go into it, and one of the things I've noticed, it's just in my short time paying attention, right? I mean, because I'm 45, but maybe I've been paying attention since I was 20, right? And in the grand scheme of things, 25 years is nothing, right? But you see these that's enough time to see the wild ebbs and flows of things, right? Oh. To where it's, and you just see these wild things. And I just wonder sometimes, like, you have elections upon elections, and now everyone's just half their job, maybe more, is just trying to get reelected all the time.
Oh, so easily.
Yeah. And so I always, go ahead.
They have, both parties, office buildings just across the street from the official halls of Congress, where they hurry when they can and spend hours on the phone calling big money donors to convince them to give them money. I mean, that same time, they could be spending, I don't know, figuring out how to end poverty in Duluth, or helping starving children in Selma, Alabama. It's just it's astonishing.
It is.
Politics has become. I mean, it used to politics. I think of politics as any human interaction involving power. And
Brilliant way to put it.
Once the polis, which is the Greek term where we got politics, once that became everywhere, now every interaction we have with human beings somehow is about politics. I mean, I didn't want it to be like that. I mean, I liked having that separation. And I think all of our viewers wish that life were far less political. But this is what we've evolved to as a global culture, I would say.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's what's interesting because I was my older brother, Mike, is a civics teacher. He's been teaching civics for forever in government and these things. And we were talking about it one day because I'm like, maybe does it make sense for presidents to be every 4 years and for senators to be, I think Senate's also 4 years, if I remember right.
6.
Is it 6? Okay. Maybe some of them should be the longer, and then they don't have to run for re-election for a long time. When you're voting for them, you're in a 10-year commitment, right? Like I'm in this marriage now for 10 years. Maybe that would increase, the quality of candidate, right? The amount of people voting. If there's less chance, right? Supply and demand. There's less supply of, so you need to get out. When you guys were working on the Montana Convention Constitution, was there anything structural like that, like term limits, things like that? Was that part of the conversation, or was that
all those things were discussed? I mean, they discussed weird things. I can't even remember the weird things. But it was a moment in time that was open to any idea a delegate wanted to bring up, and that was able to, and to do it without partisanship, allowed them to bring really good ideas, or even just common sense ideas. It just it allowed clean ideas that can be read and understood by an average citizen. That's what government should be like,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And from your description of it, just out of college and everything, it sounds like clearly you were the Alexander Hamilton of the group.
I not quite, but I was certainly one of the ones who I worked on on writing with several of the committees. It was just, I can't tell you again, Bill, how much it was an extraordinary, wonderful, fulfilling, and the senator from Montana said, it's going to be the most important thing you ever did. And I had to agree with him. And this was after Condor and other things were happening.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm trying to meet that now with my fiction about those same kinds of things. I'm shifting from just showing via thrillers to showing by telling stories of ordinary Americans in our past, and stories about our past that reflect how we got here today, and thus maybe where we might be headed tomorrow. But we can change. We can still change tomorrow.
Right. Right.
Don't know your past, won't know your future,
Very true. Very true. And I think that's a beautiful transition then. So maybe we can talk about the smoke in our eyes, a bit here.
Sure.
So, and one of the things I think you touched on a little bit with the small town is one of the things that really jumped out to me reading it was this Vernon. I thought I read, is that a fictional town?
It is a completely fictional town. There was no way. with the rules of everything from libel to just respecting
Sure.
people's privacy.
Right.
Once I realized I couldn't write about my hometown of Shelby, but I could create a fictional version of that hometown and a couple other hometown stories I'd been told by other people. I was able to, in a way, by creating that fiction, I was able to tell more truth.
Sure.
And it really freed me, and it frees the reader from feeling like he's being just fed history or intruding on real people. This is stories that could have happened to someone they knew, and maybe some of these stories happened to them. We all grew up, and the power of a coming of age novel like Smoke Gets in Your Eyes is it's about all of us, because we all grow up.
Right.
And everybody does it different.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's beautiful about it, though, is that like it's universal, it's unique all at the same time. So you can see someone else's experience and see so much in yourself, even if it didn't play out exactly that way, because you had your own unique experience, but you can really relate to it and then reflect upon yourself and take something from that that's more meaningful than just the text itself. Because then that's what I love about fiction. That's why I write it too, is that I love that I can take this, or I can write this, and you can take it, and that becomes something in you that's
exactly
that is yours now.
We as fiction authors are offering our readers a chance to take I don't even call it the fruits of our labor, the expressions of our soul and our heart, channeled by our mind and in, like my case, a small amount of talent, and then use that somewhere in their lives they're living beyond the book. And if something that you or I as a fiction author have written that just makes a light bulb come on for a split second in a reader, we've accomplished more than we dared. Right. And I love it when I have a reader who will reach out to me and say, "Oh my God, that happened to me, but I didn't understand that." And at that point, I want to hug them.
I know. Instead of book signings, there should just be book huggings. So you get a hug. And
I've seen authors do that. Actually, is hug everybody who comes in to get their book signed. Right,
I believe it. Yeah, I think it's beautiful. Yeah. And then what I love too is that with Vernon, it's so, and that was going to be one of my questions, if it was just kind of a what's the word I'm looking for, amalgam of like different places, like where you grew up, maybe some other places, because it's drawn so beautifully. There's the I'm going to paraphrase badly, so that's my gig on the show, so forgive me. But I think there's the Red Devil house, right? House, and they titled that the Red Devil house over here. And there's literally the wrong side of the tracks, which they wouldn't have used the term at the time, but it was kind of gentrifying. It's where they're building the new nice houses and everything. And the town is drawn with all the flaws and personality of just another character. And so you get to see that town coming to age, along with Lucas and everyone else. Was that intentional as you were writing it, or is that just something that came about? It
became intentional. I realized as I was writing Smoke that I wasn't just telling the story of a 10-year-old protagonist in having these wild adventures with prostitutes and, lawbreakers and brokenhearted lovers. I was telling the story of there are no ordinary Americans. There are no ordinary people. I was telling the story of people living their lives outside of the spotlight and finding meaning and finding redemption in their acts, or suffering from heartbreak or anger or spite or greed, all those emotions, and that filled the town and helped make the town, and it helped make our country. And I had as when I was writing this, the smoke in our eyes, I had to capture all of that as honestly, and I almost want to say gently as I could, because I wanted it to speak for itself. I didn't want me to say, and that means that no.
Right.
I just needed to present it and show it in a way that the reader could go, that's like the life I grew up in.
Sure.
And even though it was in Pittsburgh or Waterbury, Maine, or Oklahoma City, it was where stories about us came to life, and that's what I wanted. That's what I'm trying to do, and I think I did okay with, given the blurb, with the smoke in our eyes. I mean,
yeah.
How lucky is it to be compared to To Kill a Mockingbird? I felt like I should just don't even publish the book.
I can't live up to this. Yeah. Well, to give you an on-air blurb, I loved it. I just and I think I mentioned this off camera, so I'll mention it on camera. We've been out of our house for 3 months. They've been doing renovations. We've been in an Airbnb. We've been all kinds of untold chaos in life, and so I've been reading that off and on my phone because you were gracious enough to send me an advanced copy. So I got the app, like the Microsoft 360, so I could read the Word document on my phone. So any chance I get, I'm reading it. And it helped get me through it. It was one of the beautiful things I think about reading too is the distraction isn't the perfect word. It may be escape is maybe better, is that it gave me that escape. So it kind of became okay, I have 20 minutes. I need to go pick my son up. I have 20 minutes to sit. I can sit and read and be enriched, but then also kind of just have a moment to escape from my current situation and just be in someone else's and relate to it. So I think it's brilliant, and I hope you continue to get raving reviews and everything else with it. So it was lovely, and I'm honored to have had a chance to read it, and I was touched. So you can give me a hug.
That's as close as we can do today, folks. But I got to tell you, this man deserves a hug. So
awesome. And then one of the things too about it that I really took is one of the tenets with most of my writing is I've always thought of characters not as protagonist here, and then antagonist over here, is that we're both, right? In my story, I'm the protagonist. You talk to my daughters when they're teenagers, maybe to this day, I'm the antagonist. So we're kind of both. And I thought, especially the multi-generational element of it. Like the one of the scenes that really touched me was the scene when they had to take grandma to the nursing home, or had to, maybe not the exact, but and she's there, and you can see that they don't necessarily want to, but it's kind of the sensible decision. She does not like it.
Yep.
And then you see Lucas, who's kind of caught in the middle, is her kind of chauffeur pushing her around, in the wheelchair. And you really get that sense of, they're all kind of protagonists, antagonists to each other. And you're seeing that complicated, conflicting sometimes interplay. Is that something you intentionally infused in the novel, or is that just naturally came about?
No, you caught something I intentionally did. None of us are heroes or villains. We're like a shuffled deck of cards, and some of us, other people, are more heroic than us. But life, you can't approach life in a meaningful way if you're not willing to make mistakes, and maybe sometimes you do the wrong thing trying to do another right thing. And that was one of the complexities I wanted to catch in Smoke. And especially the multi-generational thing, because one of the things about growing up is those moments when you realize, when your teenage daughter realizes that, oh, maybe dad isn't so, oh my God. He's maybe right about some of this stuff. And those moments help you build your own life. So I wanted to be able to portray as many of those as could fit within the flow of the story. And it just, I love people. I completely love people, and that's I think one of the powers of my fiction is that love comes through.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it really comes through. I think the other part of that scene that was so powerful is that then at the end of dinner, they've told her you're going to the nursing home, and they sit in front of the TV and she's watching that television evangelist. And for the kids out there was a time when TV wasn't streaming. What was on at that time. And she's sitting in front of the television evangelist, and he seems what's the old term for those healing guys that there's a derogatory term I can't think of.
We used to call them quacks, or there. I know the term you're thinking of, but this is how much our culture has changed. It's gone. That term is even if we came up with it, half our viewers would go, I don't know if I've ever heard that before.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and it's the idea that there were only 3 TV networks for most people, and one of those networks would show a fake healing show that people would get sucked into, and it was really, when you think about it, that was kind of a preview of what happens now on social media a lot. Complete bullshit comes out of the screens in our hands and in front of us, and it can suck in millions of people.
Sure. That's brilliant, because that's exactly where I was heading next with it, is that was a very particular to that time, because people nowadays, like people growing up, the older wouldn't realize, like 20 on, maybe even 30 on, don't realize, like, oh, the TV was just at that time, like started being to where you could record it, and now it's all streaming. So that was particular of the time, but that being sucked into the screen, being sucked into this falsity, this fallacy, this quack, right? This healing fake from the screen isn't a new thing. That's that's something that's been happening, but that's something that's still extremely relevant, maybe more relevant.
I would say more relevant now because they've gotten better at it.
Yeah.
And we spend now so much of our time in various screens. I still go to movies. I watch television. I'm on my computer. I have my cell phone. There must be 4 major screens just aimed at me.
Right.
And they're all competing for what's going on in my life on one level. And I hope that all of us can begin to liberate ourselves and live our lives as human beings. And, part of the way we do that is through fiction,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And hearing fiction allows us to imagine a different kind of life for ourselves. Well,
and it gives you that in a very real way. You walk in someone else's shoes.
Yes.
Right? It's like, you don't know until you walk down a mile in that person's shoes, but you don't in reality really get too much. But fiction gives you that opportunity to go, I've never been to Montana, right? But I can get a sense for that place and what it was like for Lucas being there, and even the sisters, everyone. Like you get a chance to see that and actually experience that in a meaningful way. I don't think you do from a screen. I don't think you fully. I think there's a magic to reading because when we do language, we internalize all of it. So I read this, I'm now internalizing it in a way I don't, generally do with TV and things. That have a movie, a TV, and there's benefits to it, and you can definitely be moved, moved to tears. Right? You have great things can come from it, but it's not the same. And I think sometimes we've erred so much to just, especially with like videos now, and a lot of them get shorter and shorter. It's like, like YouTube rewards you for doing these short videos, and this clearly isn't one. But what I've started to do just to get light on the show is I'll just take pieces from this and put it into, and it's 60 seconds. And it's crazy because as I watch it, I do some light editing on the show. And I'm like, okay, I'll try to see those little 60 seconds where it's interesting. I can put it on and maybe people want to come sit, spend a couple hours with us. And it's like, but that was 2 minutes. And that was a really brilliant 2 minutes. I loved listening to it again. But then I'm like, I have to somehow try to get this to 60 seconds for algorithm. Like,
the algorithms rule our lives more and more.
Right. Also, and so maybe before we get to the reading, because I'm sure we have, I'm positive because I've talked to some of them. We have a lot of writers in our audience. So maybe we could talk about the writing aspect more generally and more specifically. Wherever we want to take it is always fine. But I'm wondering what your writing process is like generally, and did it change from writing kind of the thrillers to writing something maybe how would you describe sort of more literary in terms? I don't always love the genre terms, so I've never been great at learning them.
Yeah. The genre terms are one of the things, we have this mutual friend named Bill who wants to write this story about a guy who goes home to his rich father, and there are spies and there are ghosts, and it's a great thriller, and he's thinking of calling it Hamlet.
Right.
So every time I think of genres, I think of something like that. My writing process is so endemic to me. I've often described it as a cross between a heroin addiction and sex. And I know I never came.
Get that sip down because I decided to take a drink right as you were saying that and just barely get it down, or I would have done a spit take on that. And the first spit take of the show. So maybe it's too bad I missed it.
No, I go into a place, and my best writing happens, after as close to after I wake up as possible. The paper, coffee, walk the dog, make sure everything's okay in the family that are, mostly gone out of the house. It's me and my wife now. And then I go upstairs to my little loft office where we are now. I have to look at the email. I have to, check Facebook for my friends' birthdays mostly. And I pull up the piece of fiction I'm working on, and I literally fall into it. It's a wonderful, I don't think as I write and I think about how to make that work. It's a total not free form, but it's a total life body experience, mind body spirit. I mean, I'll find myself moving back and forth or intently typing on the keyboard. And I find, and in my younger days, I pushed this to like 8 hours, but now I don't really, I usually stop after 6 full hours of writing, because you get to hour 7 and you realize you're a genius. And oh my God, why doesn't the Nobel Prize Committee just call me and get it over with? And then you come back the next day and you read what you wrote after hour 7, and you got to throw it out. You got to, because you became attached to yourself or something in that. Sure. I do a huge amount of rewriting. And I use tricks like I'll work backwards from the last chapter that I wrote, and I'll count the number of commas, and I'll there's just all these little things that I've learned over the years that help create the finished product. And there's you're constantly rewriting. I don't understand people who don't rewrite all the time.
Sure.
And good for them, not good for me. I want to give. I'm always aware of who I'm writing for, and early on, I realized I wanted to write for ordinary people, and I landed on the idea of Nebraska. And there is a town called Beaver Crossing, Nebraska, and there's a family there, man, woman, kids. I write for them. I write for them. I don't write for the New York very sophisticated set. I don't write for Hollywood. I don't write for the political savants in 3 miles from my house in Washington, D.C. I write for Nebraska because I've never spent much time there, but I know those, and they deserve to have me focused on them. So that's, I don't know. It's a wonderful evolving process I have. I don't think of the genre I'm in, that I'm working on. Some of my thrillers on one level read more like literary fiction, and to some degree this literary, The Smoke in Our Eyes, which is, I guess, it's a coming of age novel, so I guess it's a literary novel. It's got all the elements of a thriller in there. I mean, there's a ticking clock. The wonder of what we do, I think all of us as authors could rhapsodize about it for hours, but ultimately we'd say, I've got no clue. It's just it's a wonderful mystery that I get to be part of. And that's what I feel. I feel like I'm working for the reader and I get to be part of that process.
Sure. It's kind of a constant reinvention almost, right? It's like, I could do this. I'm working on this.
Absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. So, because I remember talking with, different conferences, they talked about writer's block, and not, don't shame me. People out there, I've never felt like I had writer's block, but because I think part of it is there's a mentality to it. For one, I think if you believe in it, it's almost a placebo effect, right? That now I have block, right? If I don't write for a couple of weeks, right now I haven't written for 3 weeks because life is just too messy, right? I don't have time to sit and dive into it, like he's like fall into it like you described. And so I'll be more frustrated if I try to write right now and I can only do it for a half hour. I will occasionally do these little like bursts, but it has to be kind of when I do it. But I think you have to, sometimes I've done this process and this has always worked for me, but maybe for this story, it's not working. Maybe at this time in your life, that's not working and you need to just come at it at a different angle. And I think there's always a way. You just have to kind of, search through it and then just know sometimes when you need a break,
Yeah.
Have you ever dealt with any writing block or?
I've taken breaks, and let me pass on Richard Hugo, who was head of the Yale Young Poets Society, but I studied under him in Montana. When one of his students mentioned writer's block, he said, "Okay, here's what you do." And he was a insistent former factory line worker and bombardier in World War II. He said, "You pick a color like red. You go outside. The first red car, you look down at the license plate. The first two numbers are the number of stanzas you're going to write. The second two numbers are the number of lines you're going to write. And you got to write a poem using those rules. And what's going to happen is, as you're messing around with these stupid rules and this stupid coincidence that has nothing to do with, suddenly your writer's block is gone." So that method has I've adapted it a little bit for fiction, where I would say to someone, pick up a newspaper. What's your favorite number between 1 and 10? Go to page 9 that you picked, the bottom story, fictionalize that. And they go, "Wow," and I've had people come back to me and say, "I tried that. That was such a mess. The next thing I know, I'm writing the novel that we're going to talk about today." So it is a real thing, writer's block, but there are ways out of it. And part of it is you just have to have faith in yourself, in the readers, and into the power of this thing we do called fiction.
Well, I was going to ask, so one of the hot button thing everyone likes to talk about or worry about, maybe more apt, is artificial intelligence, right? It's talked about like journalists going on Google. Well, a lot of times journalists and writers are going on artificial, chat GPT, whatever the flavor of the day is, and writing. Do you worry about the chat GPTs of the world, or?
I worry about artificial intelligence. I mean, I saw Terminator.
Absolutely right.
There was a whole body of science fiction writers in the 50s who didn't have the vocabulary, but were talking about the machines running things. Right. And I think that I think that we have to race to keep ahead of that, so we retain our humanity. I mean, the idea that I would use chap whatever to create a paragraph for my people in Nebraska. Is, I mean, I want to punch myself if I ever do that.
Right, really.
And it just, I want to, we need to keep our humanity by using our humanity to do so. Right. I mean, that even goes back. You can look at World War II when the Nazis lost their humanity, they almost destroyed humanity. And the same with Stalin. I mean, Jesus. I mean, the gulags. That was a complete anti-humanistic thing, and we're still suffering from it. So we have to. I understand that there are some really good things artificial intelligence could maybe do for us, but I don't want them to do all the things they're capable of.
Right. Well, and there's and I've always I've never worried about it. I mean, I think really the thing to worry about is the, Arnold Schwarzenegger showing up at your door with a shotgun that as a robot. That's more to worry about than does AI take writers' jobs, But I've always thought of it very similar to that, is that if AI can write what I'm writing, I'm probably not writing the right thing, for one, right? It's just, especially the way it is now, it's just generative. It's just taking what it has and spitting out more of that. And that, not what, to some degree, we all write based on a tradition, and we grow from a tradition, and we try to contradict that tradition at different points, right? Like, it's just like us as people, right? You have a tradition you come from, you have a family, you learn from that, you're a part of that, but then at some point you also want to break or have a little bit of your own self from that.
Right.
So I don't think, as far as writers go, if AI is taking your job, then you're probably letting it take your job. You need to write that human thing. What's the thing the robot can't do?
It depends if your job is being controlled by someone else. I mean, if it's just me and I go and I say, "Hey, AI, come on in,"
right,
and it takes over, and I wake up in the morning with this completed novel that my agent maybe thinks he should sell, then that was my fault.
Right.
If I'm working on a television show, I mean, I'm a Writers Guild member, and the studio wants to just copy Frasier, and puts in AI, I guess pods or something, to spill things out. And my job is only to make sure, he used the right slang word for today. Then I've been pushed out of my creativity by money wanting to be made. And the thing is, people, I think, will turn off eventually from AI. I mean, it's like, this show doesn't reach the emotions, or is too blatant, or is too, it's too phony. I think people, we're still capable of detecting phoniness. And I think that one of the strengths we need to cling to, and we need to watch AI incredibly carefully, but let's let it help cure cancer.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's uses for it, right? That's what my kids heard this so many times growing up that they get tired of hearing it. But I was never a stickler for if they cussed or not. But if every other word was the F word, I'm like, so why do you just repeat the same word over and over?
Yeah.
And it says, words are tools. You want to use the right one for the job. So you don't use a hammer every time. The F word is your hammer. You're smacking everything with a hammer right now.
Right.
That doesn't make sense either. Use your vocabulary. And I think that's kind of life. Is AI can be incredibly impactful. Let's use it for the things that make sense to use it for, and not use it for the writing, the things like that. Exactly. I read somewhere where they said, especially how AI is now, within 3 generations without new things, it'll just start, spitting out garbage, because it's just building on itself. So it's like, no, we need people, we need writers, we need, real people to go write movies, and we need studios that allow them to go write real movies, not tell them to go rewrite Frasier. Right. Because rewrite Frasier, sure, use an AI bot. Like, let's make a new show. We don't need to reboot and rehash everything that's ever come before us. But awesome. And so maybe then we can transition. I think we'd be remiss not to talk about Condor a little bit. So and what I'm wondering is, with it, so you write the novel, and if immediately right away you have every young person's dream, and it gets what then was the process like from after that board meeting, from it being your novel to being turned into a movie?
Well, it so much of it was happening so fast, and so much of it was happening out of my sight, especially when I was still in Montana.
Sure.
I didn't, the other thing that happened with Condor was just as they were trying to adapt the book, the Watergate scandals and the CIA scandals were breaking. Literally, they were having to rewrite things as they were building the sets. And the moment they signed Robert Redford, he said, "Look, I've got another movie to do after Condor. It's called All the President's Men. I have to move to Washington to film All the President's Men, and I'll be away from my family for 6 months." So I had set Condor in Washington, D.C., and he said, "I'm not going to do this novel away from my family in New York, so let's move the scene to New York." And in retrospect, that was a brilliant move. It changed many things. And as you know, they let me come on set. Oh my God, they were so nervous. I finally convinced that they had 2 PR guys walking me everywhere, and I finally just turned around and I said, "Guys, I don't care if you turn this into a Bobbsey Twins porno movie. I'm just so lucky that you're doing this." And I literally turned around, picked up a coffee. They were gone. And from then on, I had the run of the set. And it's like Sydney Pollack telling me, "Look, we can't show Robert Redford on the run and looking scraggly after a certain amount of time. So we crushed as much as we could into as few a days as we had. We counted them up. We talked with the makeup people. We came up with 3 days. So that's what you got." And but the changes from prose fiction to any kind of cinematic work are so complex that you've got to jump up. There's got to be differences. And I say this, I think they did a better job with the movie than I did with the book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, they were, I was 23 years old when I wrote that. I really didn't know a whole lot about life. And they were able to bring in some of those nuances that we've talked about, characters and people that I'd seen once or twice, but not enough to write about.
Right.
And it was, and then, immediately changing. We had the oil embargo. So suddenly, instead of about rogue heroin smuggling, which is what the book was about, it became about oil. And it was the whole process was such an education for me. It was great on every level, and it helped, inform everything I did after that.
Yeah, I believe it. And that was going to be one of my questions too, because I know when just with audiobooks and things, when I've heard the audio, the narrator read it, or even like some of the cinematic trailers for the books, I've seen them and like, oh, I had this new idea. I wish I had thought of that. Like that spawned something. I wish I'd written that. So it was going to be one of my questions. Was there anything when you saw the movie that made you think like, oh yeah, oil embargo? I mean, times also changed a little, right after you wrote it, but yeah, the characters, all of that. That's interesting. Was there anything?
It was when I saw the movie, I was first blown away. I'm sitting in a chair and my name comes across the movie screen. What do that experience? And when the movie was over, I realized they had created a great and semi-independent thing beyond me. And some of the techniques that they used educated me for what I wanted to be doing for the rest of my career. And much of it was stuff I couldn't articulate at the time and still have trouble with articulating, but you learn. I mean, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I do and did as a young writer, I'd read a book and I couldn't figure out how the guy made me love it. I'd read it 2 or 3 more times. I would go to the repertoire. We used to have repertory cinemas in America, and I'd watch old movies, and I would watch them 3 or 4 times, trying to figure out how come I love this movie so much.
Sure.
Right. And you when you get to that stage where you can learn from somebody else's art, it's really wonderful. And I stand on 100,000 better writers' work.
Right. Yeah, and we all do, right? That's the beautiful part. If you don't, you're slipping somewhere. I mean, it's
And any author who says they don't, I would not trust. They're either delusional or who knows.
Right. Yeah. Who knows? So, is there any advice you'd give for any writers out there, or anything? Maybe a fun way to phrase it would be: is there anything you learned as a writer that you wish you had learned earlier?
I think just to persevere. I had to, because of the sex heroin addiction thing. But if you have that dream, and if your dream is to write as opposed to have written, which is different. Right. If you have that dream to write, you've got to figure out how to make that dream real. If you're like me, if it means getting up at 5:30 in the morning to get 90 minutes in before you go to a job that pays your bills, use that. If it's Steve Hunter, Pulitzer Prize winner, one of the best thriller writers out there today still. He said there's a 6-word lesson on how to write a book. Start now, work every day, finish. And that's it's perseverance. It's and honesty and commitment, and just this is what you're doing, and it's not about you. It's about that which you are creating. It's like children. Your children are not about you. They are about themselves. You and your wife created them, but they're on their own.
Yeah. And you realize as a parent too, how quickly they just have their own thing going on. There's always that nature, nurture. It's like, I agree, nurture matters, but man, there's something just happens.
Yeah.
You come in, there's, I don't know, past lives or whatever it is. You come in and they got a personality and things that's all their own, like before you ever touch them. So yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. So before we get to the reading, I have a special section I like to call shots, because everything is drinking themed clearly. So it's just going to be a few you don't have to take shots. Optionally, you can take drinks if you like. Optionally. Just some rapid fire questions. Just give me your quick response to them, and then we'll just go. So you tell me when you're ready and we'll start drinking.
Let's go.
Okay. Who's better looking, 1974 Robert Redford or 1974 James Grady?
Oh, definitely Robert Redford.
You're too humble.
He probably looks better than me now, and he's in his age.
That's true. He's an ageless man. Who is the most annoying writer in history? It can probably preferably be someone dead, but is there any historical writers that drive you crazy?
I can't think of one right off the top of my head. I could complain about Thomas Pynchon's Gravity Rainbow, and I can tell you some of it was brilliant, and some of his other books were brilliant too. So, you know, I always feel like when I read a writer that I go, oh my God, somewhere else in his oeuvre is the great book that he wrote that I just never got a chance to read.
Right. Yeah, that's a healthy way to look at it. For me, like because I had to do like a very long paper on it in college, was Moby Dick, which I know is brilliant in its way, but my Lord, could Melville make everything that you could say in 2 words last for 2 paragraphs.
Right.
So
Right. And it's like F. Scott Fitzgerald in The Great Gatsby. Everybody is eating dinner. They're always in cafes eating dinner.
Right.
And okay, I didn't realize that until about the 3rd time I read the book, and I went,
Mr. Fitzgerald here, there's other meals in the day, even. We can mix this up a little. Have you ever witnessed anything inexplicable?
I can't say for sure I saw an UFO, but our whole town thinks we did. And
really?
It was just hanging there. It appeared on the southern horizon, and it moved away. And it was a nighttime light. Now, we were close to an Air Force base, and we could hear the jets that had been scrambled from 80 miles away. That was the most inexplicable thing I'd seen. And I'd seen some things that were so wonderful you couldn't find an explanation for them. You know, a little girl on a playground helping up a little boy and giving him her candy. I mean, that's inexplicably wonderful.
Sure. But
kind of common. But the possible UFO sighting, I'm not sure how I feel about UFOs. I don't know if I believe them. Watching Oswald shoot, or Ruby shoot Oswald, was just where do you go with that in your life? You know, it's in Dallas. You're here, and you just watch history. And so yeah, right. there are. I love the inexplicable, but I always try and find an explanation.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. Do you listen to music when you write?
I don't, and it's a real dilemma for me, because I love Americana rock and roll. I mean, I love folk. I love a certain kind of jazz. I love a lot of modern stuff. I love the 60s through the 80s, especially. I love. But if I find if I'm listening to, say, Darkness on the Edge of Town by Bruce Springsteen, suddenly that's what my writing is starting.
That's why you're right. Sure.
Yeah, and I'm using words that, so I want to give the reader my pure experience. And at the same time, in my fiction, I often reference music, because we live in a world where it used to be you couldn't walk down the street without a car radio coming by blasting you with a song that was different than the one that just went the other direction. So I sometimes when I'm reading something I've written before and published, I might listen to some music, but when I'm creating, I got to be honest, and I got to be there, not running with Bob Seger or Bruce Springsteen, or Joni Mitchell, or Chrissy. Here we go. It's like
just going
to all those great writers.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll listen to things without words. One of my favorites is actually, I like the Braveheart instrumental soundtrack. So my son, I mentioned that we're all Williams. His middle name is William Wallace, after Braveheart. So I'll listen to the Braveheart because there's no words, and it blocks out some of it. Gives me some white noise to block out the dogs and everything.
Yes, I have used once or twice. I have used music like jazz to oh, you're
Sure.
tearing down the house next door. Thank you. I don't the jackhammer. So at least the music gives it a sense that I'm apart from that. But mostly, I just it's me, and then ironically, I go downstairs to get a cup of coffee, and I always try to leave the radio on or XM Sirius station or radio or I can't remember. There's another one I listen to, and I'll walk through and I'll hear a part of a song and I'll go, oh, that's what I should be thinking about for next week's chapter. And it can be inspirational, but I can't let it inspire the next keystroke.
It makes perfect sense. And are you a Swiftie? And how many times did you attend the Eras concerts?
I have begun to acquaint myself with Taylor Swift. I am sort of very proud of how she's been able to maintain her integrity and own creativity and run her own show. I've known too many creators who never do that. So I'm becoming more of a Swiftie, but I mostly, when I go to a show, it's usually Richard Thompson or Bruce Springsteen, both of whom are. I mean, I think Richard he can't be the great American author because he's British, but he's a brilliant, simply brilliant writer. So. As is Jackson Brown, as is Bob Dylan, on and on.
Right. Very good. And the last one here. So to you, what is an author?
To me, an author is someone who lets go of themselves to help other people see revealed stories. And an author has to let go of that ego. And I think all of the great authors that we tend to love do.
Sure.
It's just, and when an author becomes beholden to his ego, as I've seen, famous authors become, it was why I wrote a sequel to 6 Days of the Condor, and then I let Condor alone for almost 15 years because I did not want the outside pressure of Condor to get in the way of me revealing the stories I wanted to tell to our viewers.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I think that makes a lot of sense too. You sometimes hear that with actors and things too, right? Is that they'll have an iconic role and purposely kind of try to do something else so that they can.
Absolutely. Yeah. We see that time and time again. Arnold Schwarzenegger going from the Terminator to playing a mixed up twin with Danny DeVito. It was, and. It's if you're true to your craft, and this is a craft as well as an art, you've got to keep growing, and sometimes that means leaving the past aside, not behind, but aside.
Sure. That's an important distinction. So awesome. So that's our shots round, and maybe getting back, since we're back to the author talk here. I will drink through that as well. Maybe now we could do a reading of Smoke.
I would I would love. I'm so excited about this book, and when you told me that I got a chance to do that, I went through the book and I wanted to give our viewers a real good shot at understanding what it's about, and I thought the first part of the first chapter. I'm going to start at the beginning, and readers will then know what kind of story Smoke in Our Eyes is. So I'm going to start on page 1, chapter 1. It's called Sunrise Service. Lucas Ross was 10 years old that Easter Sunday morning when he found diamonds on the highway. "Wake up," whispered his mother as he snuggled in his bed. "It's near dawn. Be quiet. Let your father sleep." Mom padded out of his dark bedroom. Lucas's bare feet swung around to press the gray carpet. He rubbed the sleep out of his eyes, shuffled into the hall. His parents' bedroom door was closed. He eased into the dark bathroom, shut the door, snapped on the light because, well, you have to be able to see where you're aiming. Barefooted his Batman pajamas way through the living room to the yellow walls kitchen. The coffee percolator vibrated on the gas stove burner's ring of blue flame. 2 breakfast plates faced each other on the oval kitchen table. Glasses of fresh squeezed orange juice, white bowls for cereal, silver metal spoons. He sat with his back to the picture window, framing their dark backyard. Puffy-robed teenager Laura shuffled upstairs from her basement bedroom with its pink walls and don't touch rules, settled in her chair across from Lucas. Dad mumbled, "Morning," as he appeared in the kitchen. "Dawn," said his wife. "I thought..." Couldn't sleep. He stared at the percolator's steam of bubbling coffee. "Do you want the radio on?" said Mom. "For what?" grumbled Dad. "I got the real news yesterday." But he spun a knob on that black box on the counter. A man's voice without a body filled the family's kitchen. "Has matched Russia rocketing into outer space with those science machines called satellites, so the Soviet communists are not ahead of us." Yes, thought Lucas. Meanwhile, there are reports of violence stemming from a federal judge ordering Virginia to stop segregation in its public schools. What's segregation, thought Lucas. Does my school have it? Or schools in other towns in Montana that aren't as special as Vernon? The Civil Aeronautics Board says Pilot Air caused the Iowa plane crash on a snowy night last month that killed a teenage music star and 3 other people. Lucas remembered hearing Laura and her best friend Claudia play that guy's record over and over after the plane crash. That'll be the day, woo-hoo, that'll be the day, woo-hoo. Will the radio talk about me when I die? Wondered Lucas. The post office confiscated a magazine that published excerpts from a novel called Naked Lunch. Sorry for dropping that on you folks here on Easter, but here on K-Rip's Sunday News Corral, we don't make the news, we just wrangle it. Wrangling, thought Lucas, like Grandpa being a cowboy. Wrangling, sighed the DJ for this local AM station. Some days it's too damn hard. Laura froze her hand holding the spoon of milk and cornflakes. Their parents standing by the stove frowned. Marin County residents today are waking up to the news of a tragic one-car accident on the highway south of town last night that killed 1 local teenage boy and left another one in the hospital. Authorities identified the 2 boys as Hal Hemmer and Earl Kleiss, both just juniors in Vernon High School. Oh, God! Laura's spoon clattered into her bowl. You know those boys, don't you, Laura? Mom wiped a dish rag against spilled milk. You're a sophomore, but everybody knows everybody in high school. Laura whispered, I don't know anything about that accident. Mom washed the dish rag in the kitchen sink. Dad got the just delivered big city newspaper from the front porch. Laura gripped her orange juice glass like it was a carnival carousel pole. And Lucas knew she'd lied about not knowing anything about about the accident. But he also knew that Laura was not, nope, never had been a liar. Better get ready, Mom told Laura. You've got that goddamn church thing to do. And that is how The Smoke in Our Eyes begins on an Easter Sunday morning, waiting for sunrise service in 1959.
Very good. Now, I always mute my thing during the readings, but I don't know if you noticed. There's different times it's just laugh out loud funny, like, and it there's the serious nature, and then one thing we haven't really touched on, but there's that accident plays a prominent role.
Oh yeah,
the crux of the novel.
Oh yeah.
You get introduced to Lucas, you get introduced to that accident, and then just the world at large, the new scientific thingies and satellites.
Oh, and the idea that, wait, segregation was not known to
Right.
everybody outside of, the places where it was happening.
Right. Right. Yeah. He doesn't even know what's segregation. Like, what is this? So,
yeah. And it's not as if there are any racial issues today that we, should also be thinking about.
Right. Exactly. So that was beautiful. So thank you so much. So as I like to say on the show, it's last call. You don't have to leave, but you'll have to restart the video. It's been a real honor having you on. I thank you so much for spending the time with me, for the reading, for being so gracious, to come on today. What the last question I like to ask everyone before we get to some contact info and miscellaneous right at the end, but is for other people watching today, if you were to give them one piece of advice, it can be something small, but just what's one thing they can do that would just make their life just a little bit better?
I think it's what I call our family motto, which is do good, be happy, walk true. And I drilled that into my kids, and I like to share it with anybody who listens. And I want to thank your viewers for just being here and you for having me. This is to you and to them.
Yep, to you and to them. Thank you. And to the real cousin Ty, thank you for this blue label. I'm not sure how much that's going to last, but I haven't made not much of a dent, but
we'll see where the rest of it comes around.
Awesome. And so if people want to find out, more about you and your books, what's the best place for them to go?
Oh, I would think the best place now would for me would be my revised Wikipedia, let's hope, page. And just I would go to the Amazon, for example, has a great series of blurbs about the book. You could also go to Pegasus Publishing, who are my publishers, and you could go to your local bookstore and say, do you know anything about this book called The Smoke in Our Eyes? And they will help you find out something about it. And hopefully it'll be worth your time and a few dimes. My website kept getting overrun by spam. I do have a Facebook page that I'm a little cautious about because it's an amazing number of 18-year-old women from other countries want to be my friend. It's just, I'm so fascinating to them. It's just, if only that would have happened 60 years ago. So I would say, as much as we've talked about screens, Google and look, and libraries, bookstores, and pay attention to, I don't know if you know, there's this show called Writers Drinking Whiskey. And if they pay attention to that, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you again. And I'll have the links for everyone, watching. We'll have links. We'll have a link for where you can go purchase the book and anything else we've discussed. So thanks again so much, James, for coming on. It's been, it's a real honor and